Greetings and welcome to my channel. We're live. Today we are going to be talking about the mechanics of spellcraft. I go over this quite a bit in Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1. In fact, I'm going to leave a link for the book this time, Volume 1. Let's see, let's go with the... Get that up here real quick. Okay. So that's what this is. It's the place where you can buy Volume 1 of the Sorcerer's Shadow. There is alive in there, in particular, alive. There is a video on there specifically about this and an essay, but we're going to be talking about it in detail, answering questions, that sort of thing. This is the video that goes with it. So there we go. And I'll put that in as the first thing there. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and pin the book. There we are. Tonight we are drinking Brunel de la Gardine. I don't know. It's French. I've had some of it already a while back. It's actually a gift from one of our Airbnb guests. Which is kind of cool. I'm gonna stick with my policy of not saying people's names, but it was actually, well, in the goth scene, sort of an industrial scene, sort of a minor celebrity came to stay with us. That was pretty cool. Really, really great guy. I think we actually, I think I made a new friend, honestly. But that was pretty cool. Anyways, like I said, we're going to be talking tonight about the mechanics of spellcraft. We're going to start with the basics, discuss how they work, and then we're going to go over how to do each one in greater detail. So, like I said, we'll start with the basic mechanics of how a successful spell works. And that is intent, form, charge, and then either release or containment. And those are the necessary steps. Hey, Romstead, good to see you. We're talking about the mechanics of spellcraft tonight and how to manifest. So like I said, we're going to be going over the different steps and how they are present in just about any spell that you ever see. And that's intent, form, charge, containment, or release, depending on the spell that you're casting. Back to fundamentals tonight, indeed. And there is a link to the Sorcerer's Shadow, Volume 1 pinned to the chats in this live, because there is an essay specifically on this. I've also shared the video on that particular essay. And that's the very first it's the first two comments on the live. Book 1 is the first one, and the second comment, for those that decide to push backwards, you can get to it. It's the second comment. Okay, so intent. Intent is where our spell begins. This is your statement of intent. And a lot of spells, that's what it comes down to. You have your statement of intent where this is actually stated. But that's not where the intent begins, right? The intent begins with what you decide when you decide what it is you want to cast and how you want to go. Well, not how you want to go about it, but simply what it is that you want to get. What do you intend to happen with this spell? And this should be, in some ways, fairly specific, but in other ways also kind of vague. So I know that made a lot of sense. It should be really specific, but vague at the same time. What do I mean by that? Okay, now you want it to be specific enough that it gets what you want. And you can even, while you're coming up with the intent, not all this has to be in the words, but you need to think what you want to happen, but also the ways in which it is not acceptable for it to happen, right? Because this is where the process begins. This is where that first little, if you think of it as like an avalanche, this is where that first little snowball begins to roll that directs the whole process afterwards. So, you want to know what it is that you want very specifically, but you need to leave it room as to how it's going to manifest at the same time. You can limit the means of how it's going to manifest. Like, you don't want a monkey's paw yourself, right? Like the famous story about asking for money and then your son gets hurt at work and you get work and you get money from that, or like the monkey's paw. You don't want that. You don't want to get monkey's paw. So while you're coming up with your intent, one of the things that you need to think about and consider is that it can't come from this or that, any of these negative things. In fact, you can pretty much say that it needs to come from a positive source and have that as background to your intent. Yes, this can happen. I think many of us have had examples of getting monkey pawed in one way or another, or your intent simply coming through in a different manner than you intended. Like, for example, casting an attraction spell, using glamour on yourself, and then getting the attention of people that you didn't necessarily want the attention of. That happened to me a few times early on. Because love spells are a no-no, but attraction spells to make yourself more attractive, things to make yourself look better. Oh, hey, Agatha, glad to see you. It's been a while. Yes, this is we're getting back to fundamentals tonight. We're talking about the mechanics of spellcraft. And right now we're on the intent portion, and we're going to go all through these a couple times, but this first time round, your intent, that's where the spell begins. Oh, glamour magic. Yes, glamour magic is definitely one of these types of spells, and with glamour magic in particular, this is one where if you're trying to make yourself attractive, you really want to make that intent specific. You want to consider who you're wanting to make yourself attractive for. Well, not who as an individual, because then you start getting a little targeted. I mean, that's a gray area, purposely making yourself more attractive to a particular person. But that's really not what we're talking. That's not the amount of specific that you really want to get into. But the type, you want to attract, you want to make yourself attractive to a certain type of person rather than just all around attractive. Sometimes with the glamour magic, I've even done the opposite with it and put into part of the intent that these types of people will be repelled from me and not want to come around me. Hey Kira, good to see you. We are talking about the mechanics of magic tonight. I guess you saw that when you clicked on. We're on the intent phase, but we're going to go back through all of them. Anti-glamour. Yes. In fact, things like that, that's kind of what a lot of your wards are. I have a ward. This is one of the ones that I actually, because my intent wasn't clear enough in the beginning, I have to be careful with how I use it. But I have an anti-glamour or a ward sigil made from an F and a U to keep people from we're not quite 10 minutes in. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to spell yet. Yeah, run devil run. So those type of spells, but I have one made from an F and a U. You know what? We're 9 minutes in. I'm fine. I have one made from an F and a U over top of each other like a sigil that is intended to make people fuck off. And when I've used it in the wrong places before in the wrong context and just made people fuck off that I did not want to fuck off. I call it an aversion sigil is what I actually call it. But I found it is most useful for keeping people out of places. It's I guess you would call it, I want to say Santeria, but more as Spiritissimo. It's it's Brujeria. Mexican witchcraft. It's a oil that you can get at a lot of your different botanicas that you use to make someone go away, and it's often also used for banishing. Like you will dress a candle with it, and then say what it is you want to get out of your life, and then burn the candle after the statement of intent. So with the glamour spell, that's actually, we'll go over the what do you call it? The oh, my brain. The mechanics. No, I mean, you could maybe use that as a statement of intent, like in a banishing spell. There is an old Norse tradition, which originally was the idea of beating Loki out of things, because not everyone back in the original days was a fan of his mischief. But there is a beating Loki or beating the devil out of something where you essentially tell the devil to get out, yell at him things like "Run, devil, run," and smack with sticks whatever it is you think has been possessed. And this is a way to get the devil, or originally Loki, out of an object. Just yell at him, tell him to get out, and smack it with a switch. So beating the devil out of something. But anyways, so for your for a lot of your glamour magic, you've got your intent. And like I said, you want to be fairly specific on it. And then we give that intent a form. And the form is can take a few different uh what's the word? Can take a few different aspects. It can be done in a few different ways, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. A lot of your glamour magic is usually something that's going to be cast quickly. So it's something that you've come up with before. You have the intent in place, and then the form with those will either be a small sigil that is remembered, or simply the glamour itself is given a form. Like you have an image that you visualize when you're calling up the glamour. So that's the intent. And then you've got the form, which is whatever image you visualize if you're doing a quick glamour. And then you charge it by invoking it, right? Like visualizing the sigil, or and a lot of times for me, that kind of stuff, I'm going to snap my fingers if it's appropriate, or actually will imagine myself placing on the glamour. And that's part of the form, is that placing on. And then once the glamour has been placed and charged, because you charge it by you literally charge the glamour by invoking it. You place it on, and that makes it part of you. And the placing allows it to begin filling with energy, which expands from your aura that is already present. And then it's containment, because it's being contained on your form, like your literal physical form. It's being contained on your body or your ash or your aura, depending on exactly how you want to how you want to see that, because it's both kind of. It's hanging out on the body over top of the aura as like a filter, like your TikTok filters that put all the different stuff on you. That's basically what glamour magic is putting one of those on your aura. And then eventually you're going to want to release it, right? You don't want to leave glamour on 24/7. Hey, Johnston, it's good to see you. You don't want to leave glamour on too long. You want to consciously remove the glamour. Because if you leave it on too long, first off, there is a there's a slack off, right? There's an effect of diminishing returns. If you just keeping that on, it's going to just kind of quit working, but still be there and feeding off of you. Like you've kind of wore through it, and your normal aura is going to bleed through it. But if you don't turn it off, it's still there, kind of almost like you've created a self parasite. To consciously remove it, simply envision it coming off. Like for me, like I said, a lot of times if I have time, I'll actually do something like, and then when I want it off, just take it off. Simply choosing to turn it off, essentially, however, whatever motion or thing you want to do that. And then because it's a containment once you've released it, it's pretty much just gone. That's the end of it. And while we're on it, there are higher layers of this. That's just essentially a cantrip glamour. It's something that you'd want to have prepared beforehand, but it's very simple. You just have a visualization. One of the things I used to do a lot, run, glamour buddy, run. You could. If that's how you want, if that's what you wanted to use as your removal trigger, you certainly could. In fact, I think I talked about this, the glamour I'm about to talk about. I think I talk about it in Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1, if I remember correctly. And that is Lover's Touch. That's what I call this spell. And it has a few components. For Lover's Touch, you're going to want a little bit of Dove's Blood ink, which isn't actually Dove's blood. It's just it's a red ink. You don't have to use it. You could really use just some red dye or whatever you want to use. But what I would do is I would take an ace of hearts. Sorry. Don't do this with an ace of spades. That could get strange. Okay, you take an ace of hearts and then paint the Dove's Blood ink around the heart while imagining yourself as being, well, incredibly attractive as a lover. As you're doing it, you should be desiring that your touch, this is why it's called Lover's Touch, is that your touch sparks desire and that your eyes draw in whoever looks to you. And you are imagining this as you paint Dove's blood around the heart on the Ace of Hearts. And this gives you your intent because you're creating the lover's touch and you want to imagine exactly like how you'd want that touch to feel. And then you're giving it the form of the Ace of Hearts. And then you're charging it by painting the heart with the Dove's Blood ink. And then it is contained within the form of the card. And then what you do is you take this card with you whenever you want to have that type of glamour. And then you take it out of your wallet or wherever you had it when you don't want to be using it. And this one can be quite effective. You can add into it the drawing of people to you that you would be interested in for as having. You can use it also during the intent phase, put in that it is drawing you towards people who you would find as a suitable lover, right? To make sure that you get the right people. Hey, Black Unit Griffin, glad to see you. So yeah, that's how there's a few examples of how the intent form charge containment model works in relation to glamour magic. Not much. We're doing pretty good so far. There wasn't many people on when I mentioned earlier that we had the Airbnb. We have another guest now, but we just had one leave that I think I actually made a friend. Like we had a really good time, and they are I prefer to respect people's privacy, but they're one of the members of a fairly popular industrial goth band that was like some of my friends are just gonna flip their lid if I tell them who was hanging out here over the last few days. And one of the founding members of the Temple of Satan. Not the church, like it has nothing to do with Anton LaVey. You know, the ones that actually tried to put the Baphomet up when they were oh, I can't remember what state that was in. But the ones that tried to put the Baphomet next to the Ten Commandments and actually told us the whole story. It was pretty cool. It was yeah, it was a great couple days. Like I said, I think I actually made a new friend. Hopefully they'll be coming back. Now we've got a lady here that's here to do writing, so that's pretty cool. Yes, it was Oklahoma, you're right. Yes, that sounds like what I said in the book. I'm really bad at keeping myself exactly straight. So if I gave a little bit different instructions this time on how to cast Lover's Touch than I did in the book, I cast it a little bit different every time. Every time I've ever cast it, it's been a little bit different. But that is definitely the intent, is to help you find luck in having love and drawing people towards you. And like I said, I don't see those types of spells as unethical, right? Like some people say, "Oh, don't cast any love spells at all." To me, glamour magic, things where you're making yourself more attractive, it's perfectly fine. Even a spell like if there's someone you like and you're casting to make yourself more attractive to them, I don't know. Actually, like that's a gray area. That's a gray area. I was gonna say I think that's okay, but the more I think about it, that seems I don't know. If not, it's not taking away their free will, but it seems like almost deceptive in a way, maybe. So I don't know. I'm not gonna say whether that's ethically okay or not because I think it's very much a gray area. I don't think I'd do it myself. Feels like that goes along the lines of like you know pretending you're someone you're not to get with somebody kind of thing, maybe. Anyways, so that is quite a bit about intent. Like I said, with the intent, this is where the ball starts rolling. This is where the flow begins. Well, there'll be more on the temple. I only have a little bit of time to build on it every week. So all the more that's happened with the temple is what you saw in the video. I've cleared space, made a circle, just a kind of a dirt circle now that's fairly level. Sometime this week, I'm going to start gathering stones and I'm going to make at least the first circle of stones in the next video and actually consecrate the circle. So next time there will finally be a little bit more actual spell work involved. Kind of wondering what the neighbors are going to think about that because that's like right in the front yard. But well, we live on a fairly liberal island. Should be fine. If not, I guess I'll start getting a reputation as the local witch on the island. Which on this island that wouldn't be a bad thing. Okay, so form. Form is the thing that contains the spell and gives it its ability to work its magic, essentially. This is where the whole process really begins, is with the form. A lot of times, especially with chaos magic, that form is a sigil made directly from the intent, from your statement of intent. You write out what it is you want to say, take the letters, shape them up, make the sigil. That's the form. The sigil is the form of the spell. That's the thing that is holding the energy into it. Of course, that sigil can be put on an object that holds the charge as well. but that it can be anything that is a form, whether it be a thought form, a symbol, words, a spoken word, or an object, like my key here. I've got all kinds of intent charged into the form of this key, which is all wrapped around my necklaces, or even my altar room itself. Yes, the Ace of Hearts with the Dove's Blood, that is the form that is taking the charge. That is the physical manifestation of the form. There is still as well, and thank you for asking that, because that is an important bit that I may have just kind of glossed over if you hadn't asked that. Um, when we have a material object that the form is being placed in, like the Ace of Hearts, there is essentially two forms. There's the material object that is holding part of the charge, but there is also the concept and the astral form that is being kind of held in place by the material object. So, yes, the Ace of Hearts is the form, but even more so, it is an anchor holding the form in place, if that makes sense. And that gets even more so the case with some of the things we're going to talk about later when I get to the difference between containment and release, right? Because a lot of your sigil work, like we're talking about now, is intent, form, charge, release. And when you draw the sigil, whatever you draw it on, even if you're drawing it on a piece of paper, that too is part of the form. That is a material anchor for the form itself. Exactly. I'm going to read that out loud just to make sure that it's, oh, okay. But you were right, Agatha. That's exactly how it works. Um, I guess you don't want me to read your messages out loud. That's fine. Okay. So, where were we? Right. With the form, the material aspect of the form is more of an anchor point for the astral portion of that form. And with almost all spells, there's at least some material anchor point, like with candle magic. Even though the intent is spoken and the candle, sometimes you charge sigils on it, but sometimes you just oil placed on it. But from the intent and the oiling of the candle, you're creating the form in that moment. You're giving it its anchor and allowing the form to be coalesced around the candle, which is then burned and slowly releases the spell over time. And candle magic, that's actually kind of well, it has its own gray area there, right? Because it's a containment until release. Because with candle magic, you're lighting the candle, speaking your statement of intent after oiling it, possibly carving sigils on it, depending on how you want to go about that. Sorry, there's a weird spot in my throat there when that hit. Anyways, slow down a little bit with that wine there. So, when you charge the candle, oh, I got sidetracked from that because of that cough. When you charge the candle, no, when you oil the candle, you're making the form to create the charge. Oh, yes. So, we're relying with candle magic, it's contained in the candle, and then we're relying on the law of repetition.
Every time a pattern is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases. So you're repeating this intent over and over again, and each time until it is finally released when the candle is burned all the way down. Now, a lot of times, the spell will begin to take effect before then because of the containment aspect. You're building up a charge over and over and over again. And then when the candle finally burns down, you're releasing that repeated charge out to manifest. But while it's going on, it's already creating that what was it Peter Carroll called it? Morphic field. You're creating a field of influence, but it essentially doesn't have as wide of reach until it's been released because it's anchored onto a point. And then once the candle is burnt, the anchor's point is removed and the form is released to go out and perform its work on a larger scale. I keep getting annoyed by these lingering memories I got. I was watching your video for a while. Um, you mean like you're having a past life memories kind of thing? I'm not sure what. Okay. Anyways, so yeah, the form is should be connected to the intent. According to Peter Carroll, it shouldn't look anything like the intent, but I completely disagree. The form should somehow resonate with the intent. One of my most popular videos where I talk about summoning a servitor, I go over this because I use a sigil that looks like a claw to go out and rake away danger from the person that you would be protecting in the spell. It's actually just a demonstration. I wasn't casting on anyone in particular in that moment, but that's a good example of how the form works. Just like a hand needs to have four fingers and a thumb to be able to grasp things. You want your form to be appropriate for what you're doing. Like I said, with the glamour magic, if you're using a shield that you're visualizing, you want it to be, or excuse me, a filter, whatever you want to call it. If you're using just a feeling, a vibe that you're holding on to and projecting out with the glamour magic, the form of it should be something that resonates and is going to feel attractive to the type of person that you're trying to attract. Like for me, a lot of times there's roses, right? Roses and sweetgrass when I'm trying to be seductive. There's roses, sweetgrass, maybe vanilla, and these are the things that give it the form. I imagine the feel of those coming into a field, and that field is the form. Someone stating, "How is anything spiritually useful for my eating?" Hmm. Well, I mean, to me, it absolutely is, even just for just for the enjoyment of life, having the spirituality, the context of things makes them more beautiful and aspiring. But I mean, magic is incredibly practical. Like if you want to eat or drink, for those things you need well, in these days a lot of times you need a job. And I've there's lots of spell work that helps get jobs, help get better jobs, and create general stability. Sleeping is a great example in that the S1 sigil can be used to fight insomnia. If you're having insomnia and not able to get to sleep, one of the things you can do is focus on the S1 sigil and simply meditate on it with the intent of going to sleep. So it's a very practical use. And the more you use the S1 sigil to go to sleep, the easier it gets. And it's very effective over time. While I'm on that, um, one of the most practical things is the personal sigil and sleep paralysis, because we all get sleep paralysis once in a while. It happens to everybody. Neurotypicals, people that never practice magic in their life, occasionally people get sleep paralysis. And it's not always because something's hagging you, it's not always because something is feeding on you. It can be simply a misalignment of the soul with the body. And what you can do in this when this happens is visualize your personal sigil in the tip of your finger and focus your will onto that tip of the finger and then tell it to move. And as soon as you move one finger, the sleep paralysis breaks because this forces a realignment. Beta 3. Huh. It's an interesting idea for a sigil. I mean, there is a lot of subliminal messaging that goes on a regular basis with TV commercials, small influences. When I was in Job Corps and took the retail sales class, they actually made us take do an entire section on subliminal messaging and the small ways that you can affect people to get them to buy stuff, like the type of music that they'll play in a store. Yeah, it's hard to remember things in the middle of sleep paralysis, but it does work if you can remember it. 'Cause I struggle with sleep paralysis a bit when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and that's how I got out of it, was with my personal sigil. Yeah, there is a belief with candle magic that you can't blow it out, but what I do almost always with with my candle magic is I do blow the candle out. I light it and I speak my statement of intent directly into the candle so that my words blow out the candle. Like I'll speak the statement of intent with a lot of wind so that it actually blows the candle out as I finish. And that is most often how I will do candle magic. I know it's the opposite of what people say to do, but it works for me. Yeah, that's exactly it. Just program the problems out. Program the problems out. When people touch my stuff and mess with it, it adds to what is going on rather than taking away from it. Yes, magic can be very practical. Magic is the thing that I mean, it can be used in a lot of different ways. That's actually while we're on that, um oh, I thought I had a good segue, but I mean, even just confidence sigils, like we're talking about with the glamour magic, simply having something to boost your confidence can be extremely powerful. Yeah, the black figures are extremely common to be seen during sleep paralysis. I actually have a whole video on shadow people and that sort of thing. But part of it, they are involved, but also part of it is when you're misaligned like that, you're kind of more in their world. That is rather ironic, Black Union Griffin.
It reminds me of that story with my grandma where she told me that she prayed every night for me to become Mormon. And I was like, well, I love you very much too. So I'm going to start casting every night to make you a witch. And she was like, what? And I was like, it's the same thing, Grandma. I mean, most prayer doesn't work very well. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's not really connecting up to all those forms. It's not connecting to all the things, right? When you pray, you've got an intent, but it's a vague intent because you're just kind of asking God for the things you want. But yeah, it's there. Petition. And you do have God, the God itself is your form, and the charge is the prayer being said, and the belief. And I think that's where a lot of them come into trouble. Is the belief is part of the charge with prayer. And most people, I don't think, really believe, and that's why the prayers don't work very well. And then they've got release when they say amen, right? So yeah, it's got the forms, but they're kind of vaguish, and it requires a pretty strong portion of belief. So that's part of the problem with spells, with prayer, is that they don't follow the mechanics of manifesting very well. Now, while I'm at it, and we're bringing up the word manifest thing, you got your manifestation boards, right? Those actually, as much as I don't like the idea, the law of attraction, right? It's a kind of a bastardization of belief of the law of perceptions, because the law of perceptions is belief imparts reality. The law of attraction says if you believe things, you will draw them to you. Which, yeah, kind of, kind of. If they said it more like if you act like you have these things, they will come to you if you truly believe, then yeah, it could be a little better. Yeah, I mean, it can work, but there's a lot of misunderstandings there that can become a real problem. That being said, yes, it can cause problems because they think it's belief. Basically, what they're going around telling you, it's belief creates reality. And that's a problem. That's a problem. It's not belief creates reality. It can, Jonathan. It can. Um, for me, like everybody feels things a little bit differently. But for me, it feels like pushing through saran wrap when I actually get an actual out of body, like I'm conscious and I made it out of my body. It feels like pushing through saran wrap that just kind of around you. And I've heard quite a few people describe it that way, but I have heard um, of it making a sound for other people. So possibly, yes, all truths are but half truths. But the vision board itself, I mean, you've totally got your intent, several intents that you place onto a board that is giving all these things form, and then you charge it every day and it's contained on the paper, and you got your repetition going on constantly to strengthen it. So, in and of itself, done properly, the vision board totally can work. Yes, this is true as well. Lustful results is the thing. And that's another reason why the law of attraction can um, not work out, because you're leaning too hard into that lust for results, grasping too hard. And as much as I do say there are things that can be used, there are things that can be done to harness that lust for results so that it aids you rather than hurts you. When you're doing it the way they do, when you're just literally trying to use that want as the way to get what you want,
That doesn't work because you're creating a vacuum. You're creating a sense of lack when thinking, "Oh, I want this. Oh, I want this. Oh, I want this." They should be thinking about, "I'm going to have this." But even then, it's not enough on its own. They don't have all the pieces. Yes, detachment is part of it, especially I mean with any spell. After you cast it, you don't once the casting has been fully completed, you don't want to be obsessing over it, thinking on it. Like you know, they often say talk about forgetting, but that's no, you can't forget. Just don't dwell. Don't because what happens is yes, you either release desire or rein in desire. There's certainly some truth in that. But after you've cast a spell, especially if it is one that you've released, right? Like a sigil type spell, every time you second guess yourself, every time you wonder about it, every time you think about the spell, especially anything where you, oh, I should have done this different. That's the big ones. Oh, what if I'd done this? What if I'd added that or anything like that? You're still while that spell is going, you are still in contact with its form. And when you start worrying about it, watching the pot, exactly. When you start worrying about it, it's like you're fussing with it. It's like you're messing with something and, watching the pot or one of them people that is constantly opening the stove to look in at the cake they're baking. Each time you do that, you're letting heat out, right? And that's essentially what you're doing when you are obsessing with your spell after it's been cast. Yes. There you go. Yeah, that's a good idea, Griffin. I like that. Something to just keep your mind off of it that is also related so that it's close enough that you can keep thinking about it. I like this theory. This is a very good theory. Um, I'm just spacey, you know. I pretty easy for me to not think about things or at least not think about them in a damaging way because you can think about the fact that the spell is in progress. You can even wonder about it. It's when you start thinking, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have added this to the spell, things like that. Those are pulling at the form. Or if you just worry about, oh, when is it going to manifest? Doubting at it, or even trying to rush at it can affect it. Those are very effective ways to go about. Um, oh, sorry, I got, I was thinking something in my head and started talking about that instead of what I had just said. My brain's a little bit in hyperdrive today. Okay, I'm gonna add a little more wine to my glass here. Oh wow. May have to go get that other wine during the first intermission. Okay, so let's see. We were talking about the form and why you don't want to mess with the form after the spell has been cast. And I know what I just said about during my first intermission, but apparently I need an intermission already. Be right back.
Okay, I'm back. Stupid phone dinging. That's um I installed Timu the other day and I can't figure out how to get rid of the notifications. I think that's exactly what she means, Jonathan. Smaller side bits of the spell. This is also called shoaling. And I believe it starts in Kabbalah, the idea of shoaling, but it's the idea of putting a whole bunch of intents into the same charge. So much so that you get forget what all they're at. Shoaling. Shoaling. So just replace the W with an A. And like I said, I believe it starts with Kabbalah, and there was like little bunches of little papers they would literally put into a box and then charge the whole thing at once with different desires. Or I mean, all these different intents with the same charge. And I think it's Phil Heim that talks about doing this in Chaos Magic, but that's pretty similar to what Black Unigriffin is suggesting there. Is you put a whole bunch of related intents into a box, charge them all at once, and it gets a multi, multiplicity of form. Some of them hook on, and some of them don't as much, you know. And you just kind of throw them all out there like a shotgun blast and hope that it all works. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do something like that. Ask Chat GPT how to get rid of the notifications. I hate messing with the phone, like a spray and pray. Yeah, kind of. It sounds like Black Unigriffin's made it a little more sophisticated on that than that, but that's the basic idea of what's going on there. Like I said, yeah, there you go. Was it Gordon White that come up with that, Agatha? I couldn't remember. I am horrible about being able to cite my sources for that kind of thing, especially since when I was younger, I I mean, I devoured all the occult books at a fast rate with the idea that I was looking for bits and pieces and everything. Yeah. Okay. So like I was saying about the form, in my opinion, the form should be directly connected to the intent and intentionally given a shape that is conducive to what it is that I want. Right? It should be like I said, with the one with that servitor that I did the example of, it's a bear claw that goes out and rakes away any danger to the person. A lot of times with protection spells, I actually use a turtle shell as the form. Definitely Gordon White. All right. Thank you, Agatha. It is important that I credit the right people with what they've said. I wouldn't want someone going out and talking about my stuff and like, crediting like EA co-editing or something, you know? I really anyways, that's a different that's a different topic. But especially someone like that that I'm not impressed with, right? Cuz I'm not a fan. Let's just say that I am not and never have been a fan of EA co-editing. They tried to enlist me at one point
Specifically the whole Balg organization tried to enlist me at one point. They wanted me to like do these spells for $1,000 a pop, or I'm essentially co-signing on a pact with Goetic demons and someone else. Like I'm creating a pact for someone else with a Goetic demon and charge them $1,000 to do it. And I'm like, well, for one, you can't co-sign a demonic pact. You- yeah, exactly. Yeah, EA co-editing isn't around much anymore. A brand new bar of soap. Help me use it as a form. All right. Depending on the type of a bar of soap. Okay, for Glamour Magic specifically. Why can't you co-sign that? Because it's not that kind of thing. You know, if you're making a deal with a demon, I mean, specifically, like maybe if I knew the person well, maybe if I knew the person well and could say, yeah, I can, you know, I can be a what's the word? A reference. Yeah, I can be a reference. I can say, yeah, this guy's cool. Yeah, kind of. I don't know if co-signing is the right word, but just making a pact in someone else's name with a demon. I mean, at the very worst, at the very I mean, at the even worst, that means like you said, if they don't do their end of the thing, then I'm up for it. And yeah, no, no way. Okay. So, glamour magic from a bar of soap. What I would do if it was me was I would get some rose oil. They don't usually make sweetgrass oil, I'd get some rose oil, some sweetgrass, and maybe even go to the Botanica and get like some come to me oil or something like that. And I would take the bar of soap and anoint it in the oils while making my statement of intent of whatever it is that the glamour magic that I wanted to have. So, like, if I was going to do similar to Lover's Touch, I would say, "Find me love," or I would say, "This bar of soap and these oils." No, it shouldn't have. The video shouldn't have stopped. I don't know. Like I said, my internet's kind of crappy. But anyways, you take the bar of soap, put the rose oil on it, and the come to me oil, anointing it in these oils, and saying whatever your statement of intent would be. This bar of soap will wash away, because it's soap. I would add something to it. Will wash away all things in me that others find attractive and replace it with the oils, with the rose oil and a alluring scent, and bring those to me, which I wish to well, my statement of intent is all over the place. Do not do the statement of intent the way that I just did it, right? But you want to make your statement of intent while anointing the candle. If you want to make a sigil involved, you carve the sigil into the soap beforehand. But certainly within that intent, I would make something about washing away impurities and replacing them with alluring qualities. That kind of flowed actually. So something along those lines. And then after I was done soaking it in the oils, I would then light the sweetgrass and blow it all over the soap. That's my method of charging. And then there'd be the ritual aspect, of course, of washing with the soap before I went to wherever I was going to go. to where I wanted the glamour magic. And then when I got back, I would take another shower to get the glamour back off. And then anytime you wanted to use the soap, carve the sigil back in if you started with a sigil, restate, repeat the statement of intent, and then use the whole process all over again. What if you want to make an intent, but you don't know exactly what you want? Then make the intent a little more vague. Like, it's good for these things to be specific most of the time. But if you don't know what you want out of a situation, you just know you want a positive outcome to come out of it. Say, a positive situation comes out of my divorce. I don't know why I said my divorce, but whatever it is, fulfill what my subconscious wants. Ooh, I don't know about that one, March of Time. The subconscious can be a strange beast. That could wind up in some weird places. You could simply ask for luck. Right? If you don't know exactly what you want at all, then you can make a luck charm. And then the statement of intent there is simply, I'm creating luck. And with that, something like that, usually with a luck spell, you don't directly say the intent. You simply have it as an intent, and you choose a thing that you believe is lucky. Ideally, taking something from a lucky moment. For that type of thing, you want to actually get the ball. You want to have something where the ball's already rolling, right? People talk about the lucky dime they had in their pocket when that such and such a thing happened. But you can take that lucky moment and carry it forward, the luck that was in that. And that is your intent, is to carry the luck from that moment forward. And then you give it its form by simply stating, this is my lucky dime. And then you charge it by belief and keep it around. Now, that's why just a rabbit's foot doesn't work. Now, if you were real lucky to get that rabbit, like if you're a rabbit hunter and it was sheer luck that you got this particular rabbit, taking one of that rabbit's feet and using that to carry forward would be a different thing. Yeah, there you go. Yes, that's exactly how I would go about it, Agatha. Very, very good. See, dreams are weird things, Jonathan. Dreams, they tend to bypass parts of the conscious mind when they make their thing. So the symbolism to them is being straightforward, right? That part of your mind doesn't use words the way that your conscious mind does, the part of your mind that is developing and creating your dreams. So that's what it understands is symbolism. And that's assuming that you're staying within your own mind. If you get outside of your own mind, sometimes there are things that your human mind simply can't contain that you might experience. And you can come back, but even if it's not overly complicated, there can be things in it that when your mind tries to process it, it doesn't make sense. So it's going to weed it out. It's going to put it into metaphor. It's going to change things because that's unfortunately how our brains work. They have to be able to make sense of everything. They have to be able to create a narrative. Because if your brain doesn't create a narrative, you won't know what's going on, right? This isn't a bad thing. It's what our brains do. It's what they're for. But it has a lot of unfortunate filters on it that will change things that it doesn't understand in a way that it can, right? Okay, so the form.
Um, we're gonna go back over that a bit more, but let's go ahead and get on to charge. Charge is the easy part in a lot of ways because it can be as simple as literally imagining energy coming out of your hands into the object, into the sigil. It can be as pleasurable as using an orgasm to charge the sigil. It can be simply speaking in. It is simply adding energy, which can be done in a plethora of different ways. I was going to say multiplicity, but that sounded weird. And it can be done in a whole lot of different ways. I don't necessarily need to be using a whole bunch of big words, right? So, yeah, it. I mean, the ways the thing can be charged are almost infinite because you're just adding energy. Now, the form of your charge can be improved by specifying and tailoring the energy that you were adding to a spell to what you were doing. Like you wouldn't with the glamour magic, you don't want to be angry, right? You're not good if you want to allure people, you don't want to be charging it with rage gnosis. You don't want to be charging it with anger. You want to be charging it with seduction, with feeling yourself and feeling the things that are going into that soap and just, you know, go into it. And that is the charge, is just allowing yourself in, taking that on. You provide the charge, but it's sultry, right? It's sensual. It's the the feeling that you feed in to the spell should be connected to the feeling you are trying to replicate, right? Like if you're trying to do a wording spell, like with the FU aversion sigil that I did earlier, with that you can totally use rage gnosis because people tend to back away from that feeling. I wouldn't want to charge it with sensual desire or anything like that because it's counterproductive to the form. Like with the FU sigil, its form is basically fuck you. Right? That's its form. Is that feeling is that sigil and then making people go away. So that's when you can totally charge with anger, like, fuck you, get out of here. You know, stay out of my place. That's the kind of feeling. That's the kind of charge that you want to make. Oh, thank you, Agatha. Yeah, so you want to charge glamour with sensual, and something that is anger based. You can totally use anger, like apathetic charge. Mm. I suppose if you were, depending on what you were trying to do, like I'm not sure how much energy is really in apathy. It's kind of antithetic to the idea of energy, but certainly you could use apathy to charge a spell if you were like if you were trying to make someone else bored, which seems incredibly cruel to me. But that's like one of my greatest fears is boredom. I don't like to be bored. I'm also very bad at being bored. It's extremely rare because I find entertainment. But yeah, an apathy charge, you could use apathy to charge a spell to make someone bored or to make someone give up on something, you know? So for certain right and kind of curse work, yeah, you could totally charge something with apathy. And speaking of, well, back to the form bit. If you're doing a curse spell, the resulting form should be pokey, right? Or stabby or scary, etc. Like, we'll get into that again with the containment part. And we'll talk about some of the more dramatic ways that can be done. But anyways, we are on charge. So charge should be connected to the form just as much as the intent should flow into the form, and the form should be charged by something that resonates properly with the form. Yes. Yes. Either with what you're feeling about the situation that you're trying to change, or with if you're trying to make someone feel something, it should be charged with something similar to what you want them to feel. So, like if you're trying to make them miserable, give up, something like that, you could totally charge it with apathy. You could also charge it with rage and just try to hit them so hard that they give up, kind of thing. But a lot of times it's good to mesh with that energy and charge it with exactly what it is you're trying to create in the target. um, I don't think I've mentioned the FU sigil in the books. If you have a rage love spell intention scripted, it might work. It might work. You know, might be a very passionate romance. That's the one thing about that. If you use rage to charge a love spell, you're liable to wind up with a very angry relationship, I would think. Unciaya. I don't know how that's pronounced. The Magic of Belly Dance. I think I may have seen that actually. That seems familiar. When I was a traveling salesman, the lead of my team pretty much used glamour magic, and he got mad at me for not using it. In fact, one of the last days I worked with those people, he's like, "Look, I know you can do this. Like he could like I guess censored about me. He's like, I know you can do this. Watch, do this." And he just went up to this lady and essentially used glamour magic and just glamored the hell out of her and got her to buy the product. And I was like, I I don't have that in me. I can use glamour magic. I don't, in the right circumstances, totally. But to just walk up to people and glamour them and to get buy in your product, awesome, Black Unigriffin. Yeah, you feel totally free to post that in CMU or wherever, because I've seen the video you're talking about. I'm almost sure of it, and it's good advice. It's good advice about how glamour magic operates. She is very correct in what she's saying. Morals can interfere with the effectiveness of the spell. That's exactly it, right? And like it didn't bother him to go glamour magic the hell out of some lady and get her to buy the cleaner that we were selling. But at the time, for me, it felt manipulative. And that's literally why I couldn't do it. Because it didn't resonate with me. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel like me. And you have to be connected to what you're doing. It's very hard to make a spell work if you don't actually want it to, right? Thank you. Very cool. Very cool indeed. Yeah. So charge should be connected to the form and as well as the intent. But because as a flow chart. All right, the intent goes into the form fits the charge, and the charge should be connected to how it's released or contained. But we're still on the charge part here for a minute before we get to the form. So I feel like there's something more I need to say here before we go on. And I'm having trouble formulating it properly. We got the important bit there about how it should be connected, and I feel like we got a pretty good description on that. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But the deal is that the charge affects how the form flows. There we go. Those are the words I was looking for. The charge affects how the form flows. Yeah, yeah, some interesting ideas on the aspects of morals, if I remember correctly. I've read less Austin Osman Spare than I should. He is going to definitely be coming up on our on the book club because I've read way less of his work than I should have. I became aware of him too late. Like I wish I'd become aware of Austin Osman Spare before I had Peter Carroll or Phil Hine or any of those guys because he's the true progenitor of all chaos magic. He's the guy. And his stuff is bits and pieces and like he doesn't write a lot of it out directly in some ways from what I have read of his stuff. So I think I would have really been into him if I had come across him earlier. But still, like I said, we're gonna get to him at some point. Intent, form, charge, and then either release or containment is the fourth one, and that's the whole thing, right? Your charge flow, how you create your charge will affect how your form flows. So now that I've got those words out, now we'll go to that last bit. Okay, how you release or contain the spell is affected by all the other bits. They're all connected, right? Just like anything else. It's gray area 51 or is it 93? So release. We're going to talk about release first. Release. These are quick spells. These are spells that are going to happen and dissipate. If you're wanting to affect something quickly, this is the way to go. Right? Like a lot of your sigil work goes this way. And a lot of times, how you will release the spell is by destroying the sigil, actually destroying the anchor point of its form to allow it to release out into the flow of fate and work your will so that your intent becomes manifest. And the beautiful thing about anything that works on a intent, form, charge, release model is that it's all about intent. It's all about momentum and flow leading up to that one moment. So, like for example, if you're casting an intent, form, charge, release spell,
You could take a piece of lettuce, carve it into the shape of a four-leaf clover, and use it as a four-leaf clover. No harm, no foul. It'll work. Work even better if you had a four-leaf clover, but still, the shape, the intent, the form, it's there. As long as you're releasing it, it'll mess a little bit with the flow that it's just really a piece of lettuce, but all the chunks are there and it got the momentum going. So that'll work. With containment spell, that anything with containment at the end, that won't work. You're gonna need a four-leaf clover if you want a four-leaf clover. Because you're not just skipping over it. You're not just skimming past on the way to the release. You're holding it. It has time to settle in and be what it is. That's why, yeah, a lot of his stuff I've read is quite incomprehensible. But at the same time, meaning is interlaced within it. Containment doesn't have any leg room because it's there for a longer period. It's some it has time, right? With a release spell, you're just creating momentum and throwing it out. With anything that's containment, it's marinating. It's sitting there developing more and more momentum as it repeats. Because anytime you're doing a containment, you're going to be doing it more than once. And each repetition, that little bit of the fact that your four-leaf clover is actually a carved piece of lettuce gets added in each time. And with one repetition, that's not a big deal. But once you've got to like 50 repetitions, and each one of them, your four-leaf clover was actually a carved piece of lettuce, that's going to affect how the spell manifests. It's going to have more of that lettuce variables and what lettuce pattern of energy in it. So it's not going to work as well. Perfect night for a money spell. Well, I suppose it would be a good night for a money spell, wouldn't it? So, yeah. Those are the main differences. But release, like I said, that's its biggest advantage to me. It's quicker, for one. You get those out there. It's easier to think of. It's a lot more user friendly because you can, as long as you've got yourself in that moment of belief, belief imparts reality, and all you need is that reality to be imparted onto the pattern that you were then throwing out. Yes, with containment, everything gets contaminated with the full effects, the full pattern of everything that is put in place within the spell. So, like, especially since more of your folk magic. Oh, there you go. I like that. Watching the I like it. Boris sigil tonight. Yes, I might. I just might. Unfortunately, the I actually do not. I am no longer the keeper of Boris's skull. I wish I was, but they caught me trying to bring him into Canada, and he's banned from Canada because he's a cow skull, mad cow disease. So he's actually with one of my friends, and she's been doing. Yes, I agree. But they caught me with him, and then
at the time had to mail him back to Utah. And then when I got back to Utah, once I realized I was going to be up here permanently, I I did a working with him to find out who he wanted to go to, and he chose someone. And so I gave them to them, him to them, and they have been taking care of him since then. The sad part about that whole thing is when that happened, I was literally like at the border getting ready to leave, and I had him right there in the car seat. Like I had him literally just buckled into the car seat next to me. And I was about to, they pretty much said I was good to go, and I was actually taking my foot off the brake to put it on the gas. And they said, "Oh, do you have anything else to declare?" And I said, "Oh, just this cow skull." Dumbass. They said, "Cow skull," and they took me inside and searched me and made me wouldn't even give me access to go across the border. I had to go somewhere and mail Boris back home. And then when I got, like I said, when I did come home, because I was going to bring him up here, because I was already by that point. Well, I decided I was going to bring him up here anyways, and that's how that ended. I snitched on myself because I'm a dumbass. Boris, he is the steward of the cash cow sigil. That is one of my most popular sigils. It's for stability, abundance, and group harmony. Here, we'll go ahead and I'll get a link for that. This is probably the best one to give. This is the link to the video for the cash cow sigil. Well, he does have like if you look closely at the picture, he has all kinds of amethyst and aventurine. And I don't remember what the third jewel is, but he has a bunch of them in his snout. And they're part of how he processes the negative energy around him and turns it into positive energy, especially with the amethyst. But yeah, I messed up real bad snitching on myself. They're like, "Cow skull." And he was, I mean, but I thought they'd seen him. He was right there on the seat. But this reminds me, if any of y'all ever choose to cross the Canadian border from the States, don't be charming. Don't be funny. Do not use your glamour magic, essentially, because they pick up on it and they don't like charming. They don't like charming at the border. Every time I've ever started being a little bit of a personality, I wind up getting searched. But the worst part about that is that I get more charming as I'm nervous, right? So they're making me nervous and mad because they're mad at me for being charming. So what do? I get more charming, and they get madder, and I get more charming, and they get madder, and like that actually got to the point where there was the last time they gave me trouble, I was only allowed up for 30 days. I had to go back and hang out for a while in Washington before I could come back into Canada again because they found my charm so suspicious, I guess. So, um, let's see. Charge. No, 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 no. We're on containment. Release versus containment. Okay. So, like I said, release. It can be very effective. It tends to be quicker. It's user friendly. It's a good place to begin learning because it's harder to mess up.
Especially, it's harder to mess up in a significant way with some kind of error, right? And this is anything where you're making a sigil and then releasing it. For the most part, candle magic counts in this category. There's a lot of repetition involved, but eventually you're releasing that sigil with the burning of the candle. So it's one of them ones, like I said earlier, it's almost in between, right? Because you're containing it to a point and then releasing it. And you can get away with some shenanigans in that. Like, as long as your statement of intent is clear and the intent that behind that is good, as long as you don't have something bizarre in the sigil work or like misaligned oils, it should be fine, right? And even if the oils are a little misaligned, it's should carry through. But like well, I guess even I've really talked myself into my own little corner here. Let me dig my way back out of this into making sense again. Right. So, with the candle magic, it can get a little screwy if you have too many things that are off, but it tends to have a little less time for that to happen. With a release spell, I mean, you still don't want to have like things that are totally out of sync, right? Like you can't use garlic as an attractant spell unless you're trying to attract people specific of a certain type specifically. Yes, he is not wanted in Canada, sadly. But well, he's wanted in Canada, but he's not allowed because of mad cow disease. They don't allow anything like that from the states. So, like, if you were trying to attract someone that likes garlic, yes, you could use garlic in a quick glamour spell, but for the most part, you wouldn't want to use garlic as a anything in an anchor to make yourself be seen as smelling good, even if you were using Quigley sigil. So there are limits. You still want things to resonate and line up, but you can use little tricks like that, like not having a real four-leaf clover, using a gold coin you got at the dollar store from a pirate set to represent a gold coin. These things will work just fine in a quick release spell. Um, Sometimes, yeah. If there's moments of despair, like I mean, I have experienced those. And for me, I rationalize my way out. I explain to myself what is good, what things are positive, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? Um Finding meaning helps with that. And I don't mean find meaning in an external thing. Like, oh, we're here to do this or that. No, I'm talking about finding meaning as in deciding, creating meaning. I said finding and I meant creating. Creating meaning, choosing what it is that you want to create and manifest. And that gives you an anchor, a core, so that when you feel despair, you have something to stand on as a rock to keep the feelings of meaninglessness and
Futility at bay. Nice. It can be quite mind blowing sometimes when your spells work, right? Especially, well, I can say early on, but even now, sometimes I'm like, oh my god. Especially stuff on a larger scale, freak me right out sometimes. Like, um, one of the ones that tripped me out significantly, like I said, isn't that recent, but the one who mimes with glitch, the first time he, the person who rhymes with glitch O'Donnell, the first time he glitched after I did what I did was just like 2 days before that first glitch where he just pauses on the podium. That blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, what have I done? Same with the other one, which was before that. Anyways, yeah, I'm not. I'm yeah. The best thing I can do about oh, it's a new question. Sorry. How should you control your emotions after a successful spell so you don't mess up future ones? Um. Well, you should release the emotion with the spell, right? If you're using that emotion, let me should make sure. I feel like I'm missing something about the question. How should you control your emotions after a successful spell so you don't mess up future ones? So you don't mess up future ones. So you mean like leaving it afterwards? Yeah, we didn't. I didn't really fully explain that. I suppose. Some people say forgetting, but I'm like, how? For one, how to truly forget without using like self hypnosis. Yeah, that's it's an extremely complicated thing to learn. It's harder to learn that than anything else in magic if you were gonna literally forget anything that you wanted. Um, let's see. How would I explain it? For me, it's just about distracting my mind from thinking the wrong things about it because I'm gonna think about the spell. But when I do, I try not to think about its form. I think about the fact that, okay, I casted this spell. And that's surprisingly hard to explain. Um, I just kind of, if I'm understanding your question correctly, how the heck would I even put this? It's it's kind of let go. Like with the emotion, you release it into the spell. And then when you come back to it, if you think about it again, like I said, what you're trying to avoid is the form. So you are able to think about the release, right? Because this is most important with release type spells. So you can think about how you released it. You can think about the moment of burning the sigil. 'Cause a lot of times with the sigil work, after you've charged it, you burn the sigil or tear it up. And you can think about that part all you like. You can think about that part all you like. You can even think about the intent. Like the stuff for the Airbnb, there are parts of it that I shouldn't be thinking about. So when I do that, I have parts that I've set up to intentionally allow myself to repeat those, like the Tavbiz Twathkat, which is the mantra that I made from it the first time. Now that's not normal for me to have that mantra to fall back on, because that's the first time I've ever tried that technique of creating a mantra. But I created a mantra and then I created a sigil from it, and eventually the um Tulpa Tabitha Tosk. But while that was going on, anytime that I started dwelling on it, I would just start repeating that mantra to myself. Tav biz Twathkat. And though that is the form, that's part of the form, it was a fully formed part of the form. So I'm not fussing with it by repeating it, right? So like I said, we're literally just trying to keep from pulling at the form itself. So you just want to avoid thinking things like, oh, I should have done this differently. What if I had done it like that? Or doubt, or anything, or especially regret. Anything where like, oh, I wish I hadn't cast that. And that's why the things like if I'd done it this way or that way, really the biggest thing we need to avoid is any feelings of regret. And when it comes to curse word, guilt. Apparently I have to do another um intermission. Back in just a moment. I'm gonna skip across the yard and grab some more wine while I'm at it. So it'll be a little bit longer than usual. Not much. Okay, I'm back. Indeed. What you said there, Agatha, about endeavor to be letting go of lust for results, including fear of not doing it right to begin with. Let's see. I definitely missed some good stuff here. Hold on. Let me catch up. Just meditate on a person's inner being. Yeah, that makes sense. You just kind of have to develop the habit, Jonathan. Like, what? I'm just gonna read your thing out here so I can answer it more clearly. So, when you play the "try not to think of the wrong things" game, does that start to charge the wrong things? Is it like trying to put a blindfold on yourself? Well, like I said, it's less of a charge thing and more of a Oh, I'm gonna pour this. I'm gonna drink straight from the bottle. Uh, I got some Lucarelli Negro Amaro that I'm drinking now. From what I remember, this one was pretty good as well. Hmm, yeah, not bad.
Okay. So, like I was saying, um, don't want to think of it as a game, for one, even though it immediately makes me think of quote unquote the game from my own youth was the idea of there was the game. And the game is you don't think about the game. And how you think about the game, you lose. I never played the game, which I guess makes me a winner in it. I don't know. Because it's the first time I've thought about it in a very long time because it didn't interest me. Um, but it's about setting that aside, right? And not thinking too much about the results. The lust for results is kind of a thing, but simply thinking of it. I suppose really the thing I do the most is that when I think back on a spell, when I think back on a spell, I do my best to keep the scientific or analytical mind, right? I think of it to myself as I'm thinking about the experiment and that it should not be interfered with. And a big part of it is simply that keeping in mind that it should be kept in isolation. It should be kept removed from your current thoughts about it. And that creates kind of a barrier. But you still don't want to, while it's in progress, think things like, I should have done this instead. You simply think about it as an interest, as a project. Think about what you might have wrote about it in your book of shadows, if you have a book of shadows, which honestly I should have, but I don't most of the time. I mean, I jot some stuff down. In a lot of ways, these YouTube videos work as my book of shadows to keep track of what I've been up to. That's something I can see there. What is that? Oh, just eyeliner. Oh, absolutely. Everything is magic. I mean, the reality itself is formed as a kind of magic. It's like a kind of meditation, but it's like I said, with everything else, intent is a big part of anything that happens on the mental, especially on the mental, but also the astral plane. And that's where the spell is taking place. So, if you're having trouble not thinking about particular aspects of the spell, as soon as you start thinking about it, remember that nothing you think at this time should be allowed to contact or connect with the spell that is being cast. The stuff you're talking about is quite cool, Unigriffin. By the way, um, I kind of get what you're talking about there. For me, though, when I flip someone, it starts with a softness in me that allows it just kind of allows them in and then back around, right? Rather than giving them the resistance that they expect with whatever angry, offensive energy they're throwing at me. I pull it in, and rather than reflecting it, I reverse it. Like you're saying about reversing their energy. Once it's allowed in, it's almost like a astral judo move, right? You just they come in and then you kind of imagine it literally turning on you as the axis and back into them.
Well, the way you're doing it is working. So, astral judo move. Yes. I thought that was kind of fun as well when I said it. Like, yeah, I like this one. Um, but yeah, that is the main thing that I do. I mean, I'm once again, I'm glad that you asked the question that you did because I was I had a hard time properly articulating that, and it made me gave me a chance to think more on like what is it that I'm doing to keep myself from fussing with the form, because I know that I've gotten to the point where I'm not, and I definitely don't always forget about my spell work. So helping me to actually articulate what I'm doing there, you know, that's thank you. That is exactly a big part of what I am here for, right? Is discussing these things helps expand all of our understanding, including mine. And that was a good one. This pleases me. Okay. So, I said in the last hour we're going to talk about some types of spells and how they fit into this model. So, hmm, of course, if you have any questions about any of the stuff we've discussed so far, this would be a good time to bring those up. Um, oh no, we haven't talked enough about containment yet. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Sorry. We just barely finished with release. We got to get into containment. Oh, say. So, containment. Containment is when you take the form and you give it a solid anchor point that you then keep rather than releasing. Like I was saying with the sigils, you know, you draw the sigil on a piece of paper and then you tear it up, you burn it, you do whatever the release is going to be. Now, there was a few more things I wanted to say on that. Like, especially if you're using anger with the sigil, tearing it up is great. You know, if you're like trying to do something where you're charging with rage gnosis, draw the sigil and then rah, and you give it an extra charge, you see, poof, tear it into pieces, you know, or burn it, throw it in the fire. There's other ones where you might throw it away. The release part can be significant. Um, and it doesn't have to literally destroy the anchor point. You simply have to be getting rid of it. Like some of them were something where like I want this out of my life. Charge the sigil, and the release is throwing it in a garbage can, tossing it away. Right? The release does not necessarily require the physical destruction of the object. And though the release can be just I destroy all my sigils by tearing them up, you can tailor the release to the yes, containment seals are definitely a form of containment. We'll get into that in just a moment. But you can tailor the release to the charge as well, right? You know, you charge it with rage gnosis and then tear it up in a frenzy of rage. Charge it with belly fire, then light it on fire. You know, or like I said, charge it with apathy and throw it. The apathy you mentioned earlier, that's actually would be a great one if you wanted something to just go away. Just charge it with the apathy of meh, and toss it in a garbage can, right? Toilet paper and flush it. Yes. This is another good one. Okay, so now on to containment. As much as the release should be tailored to the intent and overall flow, and especially to the charge, the the fixed anchor point in a containment spell should be tailored towards the intent. This is once again tailored to the intent and also the by that the form, because the form should flow from the intent. And the anchor point on a containment object should reflect the form, right? This is where you get your poppets. You know, if you're trying to cast a spell on someone and you make a poppet of them, the form of the spell is actually an astral project, but the anchor, an astral projection, not project, sorry, astral projection. Um, but the anchor point, the containment, that should look as much like the person as possible because that's where your form is. The form is whatever you want done to this person. So the anchor point, the thing that you're containing it in, should resemble what happens to that person as much as possible. Hmm. A wine bottle over down here. Don't want to do that. Okay, so it should reflect that as much as possible. This is a perfect example of like some of my more extreme curse work winds up taking the um yes. So yeah, like some of my more extreme examples of curse work will wind up in a very gross looking pouch. Something that is very freaky looking. And this isn't like, you know, like this is different than the popper. You want the poppet to look like what you want to happen to the person. You want the bundle afterwards to look like the intent itself, right? Like if it's um Tapatu Boca is a great example of this. You don't actually leave Tapatu Boca on the person's doorstep. You can, but Tapatu Boca or shut your mouth is brujeria, Mexican witchcraft. And how you do this is you actually take a tongue and drive a nail through it into a piece of wood. Like you put a picture of the person, put the nail on it, tap it into the piece of wood, and intended to hold their tongue, right? And I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder if that's really a containment spell because you don't keep that. You either put it at the crossroads or a graveyard, or if you really want to freak the person out, their doorstep. But okay, here's a good example. Someone that I was cursing once, where I knew their door, I knew where they lived. I made a power bundle that was constricted around the bundle. Like I took some bark and wove that into thread, or twisted into thread, whatever you want to call it, and then binded, tightened that down around the object, constricting it on there. And that was to squeeze them down and for them to see that compression. And part of the reason I chose that is because this person's particular animal spirit was a constricting snake. So we had that full connection, and it made that intent obvious to him in particular as to what I meant, because you want that form to take form in their mind when you are cursing someone. Yeah. I mean, curse work is not certainly not always the right way to go. But to me, cursing someone is the same as punching someone in the nose. You know, or well, it depends. Can be way worse. Depends on how far I'm trying to go and what I'm trying to do. But to me, it's just another form of violence. That's what it is. It's the same as beating somebody up. And sometimes these things seem appropriate. that being said, you know, there is some debate on the idea that people that you do curse work on wind up getting connected to you some, and you can wind up being born around them. And there is like my cousin that I mentioned in previous lives. Um, well, we've cursed each other quite a bit, and my gosh, we wind up winding in each other's lives a lot. Like almost every life I've had, they wind up around at some point, and we cause each other problems. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't honestly believe that. I don't believe that doing that kind of work causes those people to be in your life again. But either way, this sort of thing works on doesn't have to be curse work, right? On all kinds of levels. Um you can even have a repeating sigil, like with Tabitha Tosk. Not only is she a servitor, but she has a sigil that is a containment sigil that contains her. It's drawn on my wall, but the form that the sigil makes, that the form that the sigil is anchored to, is actually her at this point. You know, but her sigil is I don't destroy it. I've never I won't be destroying it. It's drawn on the wall, and I focus on it when I give her a charge, which can be done in several different ways. One of which would be repeating that mantra again, "Have bis Twathcat." Or she also has a little cat that she's developed at this point, which is the Twath cat, and that is giving the form a second anchor point that is actually in the room of the Airbnb. It's just a little cat figurine up on the mantle, and it's like essentially Tabitha's familiar in the room that allows her to monitor what's going on there and keep the vibe correct. But it's also in her room because her room is the round room that's all around the house, which is why her sigil is a circle with a little essentially a window inside the circle. Okay, let's see. What is form? Physical manifestation and astral manifestation. All right. So, form, the actual form, is taking place on the astral plane. And it is a concept, it is an idea, which is condensing, right? Like matter is energy condensed. And that's kind of what we're working for here, right? You create a astral concept and then you condense the energy of your spell work around it when you charge it. But the concept, an idea, that's the form. It is simply an image or concept that you were able to contain the energy into. And then that form is becomes part of the pattern as a moment weaves into the material plane of reality. So the astral form, then, to make this clear, I'm going to try and restate it one more time. Um, it is the intent given shape, right? The intent is on is on the mental plane. This is another important bit of how this works. The intent is on the mental plane. Your statement of intent is information. That information then becomes information in motion, information in transfer, energy. That's what energy is information in transfer. And it becomes condensed around a shape, around an idea. That is the form. And that form gets filled out by the energy and then affects the overall flow of energy around the situation that you were trying to cast upon. Cool. Kira? That's yeah, that's wherever we get that moment from, right? Wherever we get that moment of gnosis, that like for me, the first thing that really connected was when I died as a kid. And it took me till I was 15 to be able to get back to that moment. But yeah, like that being able to return to a state simply by reliving it and getting into the feeling of it and allowing your mind to slide in there. Once you've got it, each time you do it, that allows that muscle to flex. Yes. There you go, Johnston. The idea of a perfect circle and then trying to draw a perfect circle inspired by the form. Yeah, it's very much like Plato's idea of the forms. It's a concept. And then the physical form is the anchor point. It is attempting to manifest that, whether it's actually drawing a perfect circle or not. It is the anchor point for the concept of a perfect circle. What's it say? Yeah, I mean, whatever you need to charge your sigil, you know, but you can do it through other means besides getting that blank or the orgasm. You can get it through anger, sadness, rage, literal physical energy of jumping up and down and doing jumping jacks until you're just like, and your body's just, and then put your hand on the sigil and give that to it. You know, there are people that do things like with asphyxiation, but forget I said that one. I was telling myself not to say it as I said it. That's dangerous and pointless. No use for it. Fishing and gardening. Gardening is code. Fishing, yes. Well, actually, gardening isn't just code because, you know, but yeah, I'm growing the whole yard. I got big portion of the yard with tomatoes growing and all kinds of stuff. It's been a weird year for the garden. It's been a really weird year for the garden. I think we need more bees, honestly, being on the island. I don't think there's enough bees this year, and I've been getting very little fruit. Lots of flowers, very little fruit, not many bees. But yes, fishing is my religion. It is a very important thing to me. It connects me to the cycle, right? It brings me back into being a large mammalian predator. If you unalive someone with you, they are with you forever. You're certainly never going to not you're certainly going to be have a kind of connection to that person, a link which is extremely hard to sever, and it's simply because you were directly connected to a very significant moment within that person's life. So I guess you were asking Agatha that question. Okay. So, yeah, as I was saying about containment, it needs to match the form. It needs to match the form in some way, but it doesn't need to be a perfect rendition. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to draw a perfect circle for it to be a perfect circle. But if that's what you're trying to say, you should at least try to draw a circle, right? Now, this comes back to what I was talking about earlier about how with a release spell, you can take a piece of lettuce, carve it into a four-leaf clover, use it as a part of the way to charge or manifest your quick release spell. It'll work just fine. Now, if in a containment spell, you're going to need an actual four-leaf clover. You're going to need the things that actually resonate. And it's because of that repetition need, but also because now the form needs to match the anchor. So if the form has the four-leaf clover in it, then the anchor should have some rendition of a four-leaf clover. At that point, you're better off drawing one than trying to carve one out of lettuce. You can totally like draw one and have that energy of the drawing of it, and that's going to be much more powerful than trying to substitute something else. Especially if you draw it by hand. Don't just go get a sticker of a four-leaf clover. That some, but drawing it by hand with focusing on what a four-leaf clover is going to have a much higher effect than if you were to get a little sticker from a store, right? And anything that's in there, and like now I'm kind of talking about like jar spells, bottle spells, things of that nature. You need to have the correct things in there. And anything that's off as it resonates over time is going to throw the spell off. Now, there's some other things that need to be understood about release spells while we're on the subject. Release spells create a morphic field, like Peter Carroll was talking about. They create an area of influence, so they're much better for warding and things like that. Now, the area of influence is not necessarily at the anchor point. So it's not necessarily in the jar. Like when you're using a jar spell to affect someone, it's creating an area of effect, but it's not creating it at the jar. It's creating it around the person that you are casting on with the jar spell. And this is why you need actual links, actual connections for a containment type spell. You know, and it can be minor things to have a lesser effect, like their name, even their picture is less than a lock of hair. But like you can just have their birth date, name, the fact that you've made eye contact with them and drawn a sigil to represent that contact and create a link through that. Those things can be used on a containment spell. But you really what you want is links of hair, locks of hair, fingernail clippings, things like that. Now, remember, this kind of a magic does not need to be malignant. I'm not necessarily talking about curse work here. You can use these for healing. You can use those same items in the same way to generate protection, luck, health, even some work with healing. But with those, um, I suggest you get the person's consent. For one, ethical reasons, because it seems like you wouldn't be trying to protect or give luck to someone you didn't like. So there's definitely ethical concerns, but also their consent lets you in. That bolsters the power of the spell. Um, by your subconscious, but also by the actual Johnston. You said you asked. So the worthiness of the anchor being qualified to match the form is determined by your subconscious. Um, no, it's determined somewhat, um, but it's more like doing a picture of a four-leaf clover has less momentum behind it of four-leaf clover than if you were to draw one yourself and think about the shape of a four-leaf clover and what a four-leaf clover is and what it represents as you're drawing the picture. That adds a lot of that pattern, the momentum and concept of a four-leaf clover, a lot more than if you just go to the dollar store, tear a four-leaf clover sticker off of a roll of four-leaf clover stickers that you bought and toss it in the jar, right? The person that printed that out wasn't putting all those things into mind, and it's a replica of a replica of a replica of that thing, and that's why it wouldn't work as well. Once we start getting into containment, we get more outside of the self. Things are things become less anchored to the intent or less directly controlled by the intent. The intent is still where the snowball starts, but there's more room for it to veer off. Yes, has to do with the vibes produced. That is a good word for it. I usually say the variables of a thing, but it sounds so funny when I say it that way. What's the cycle? Um, I am assuming you're talking about with the law of repetition. Every time a pattern is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases. That's the cycle of the pattern itself. Like each pattern has a cycle. Everything has a kind of repetition to it. It's a flow that goes with it. And every time the same one is repeated, the likelihood of it happening again increase. And also this works with the fishing part. The cycle of life and death, the cycle of nature, and it brings me back into actually being connected into the flow and cycle of the earth to get my own food, to get my food from the real world rather than going to the grocery store and exchanging imaginary tokens for something that someone else grew or killed. And I had nothing to do with that. That is disconnecting from the cycle very much for me. And so I fish to return myself to that cycle, to return myself to that reality. Because modern human society isn't the real world, right? It's there's very few things that are actually artificial. Concept of money being one of those. But it society is all most human societies at this point are all centered around and controlled by that false narrative of practicality and materialism that is a point on the mental plane that we have been convinced is the material plane. So fishing gets me away from that, gets me back into nature. Is magic nature itself? Yes, I was getting to that earlier that all of reality is essentially spell work. You know, it all exists simply because nothing is an impossibility. It's the one thing that can't be conceived. It has no form, and so it cannot be. And that's how it is because if nothing ever was, then it wouldn't be. But beyond that, that means there is a form being charged, which we give, there's a form being charged with our intent. There are forms, there are concepts, there are ideas that get charged by people being alive by existing, by us perceiving reality, charges the form that is contained. All right, Agatha, you have a good night. I'm glad you made it on. Um, but yeah, to me, all of reality is essentially one large spell, which it's a spell that is constantly in motion, and we create our intent in it. Like I was talking earlier about creating meaning, creating your own meaning, right? Living your life as an art form, as an expression of the self. That is how we give intent and charge. That's how we give intent to the spell that is life. And then we charge it simply by living it. And it is a containment spell that is anchored within our physical form. And then when we die, that intent is released and then repeated into another form. Eventually, if unless we choose to find some way to resist reincarnation, which I was gonna say I don't choose to do, but this particular time around, when I die, I intend to be taking on a new form that I am slowly creating during this life, and I'll be taking on in a third form and essentially creating myself into a ghost. Hopefully, one that can manifest to on a fairly predictable degree. Hopefully, it'll be a long time before we find out just how successful I will be at that. Indeed, no more incarnations. I think that we all wind up incarnating again somewhere. But we've talked about that before. I'm certainly not going to tell you you're not allowed to you're not allowed to escape reincarnation. And the important part to me is that we are seeking free will. Yeah, we are seeking to do as we desire to do with our existence. Indeed. Okay, I'll look and see if what I've missed. Let's see. You asked me about the cycle. Um, a bit about oh yes, this reality is absolutely absurd, Black Unigriffin. It is gotten to a point where people are denying the physical reality because that's not what common sense. Common sense. That's the whole thing. That's the thing I'm looking for, where their common sense trumps um reality, right? That's where we've gotten to at this point. Congressional MK Ultra hearing this summer. I haven't. I didn't see that. When you use a sigil, does your subconscious have to believe the spell will work? Yes. Is a good way. I mean, short answer, yes. But your subconscious has to believe you can move your arm before you can move your arm. A hypnotist could hypnotize you into believing you could not move your arm. Once they've convinced the back part of your mind that you can't move your arm, you can't move your arm. So it's not so much that the belief, in a case of something like that, it's not so much that the belief is what's making it happen as it is so much that you have to believe you can do it before you can do it. What do I think about spiritualism? Well, to me, spiritualism is just magic. It's basically magic. You know, it's the idea that we are sovereign and we don't have to listen to any gods or organized religion and can have a personal relationship with reality, with the spirit plane. And to me, that's what spiritualism is, or at least should be. A lot of people have different ideas, but that's why I don't consider magic my religion, because religion is something that, what's the word I'm looking for here, is handed down. It is something that follows rules and traditions. And while my magic does have some of that, there's definitely stuff that's been handed down to me and like traditions that I follow. In the end, I feel beholden to nothing or no one when it comes to magic. I don't feel that the gods are more powerful than I or have more authority than I in any way, at least over my own existence. And so that's not religion. Fishing, I have dogma that was handed down to me by my father. There are certain ways of doing things that has a value inherent into itself. So that's religion. So how do I convince my subconscious that I can do something or something can occur? Um, Start with something small. Start with something small that is, frankly, might even occur without the spell work, right? Like, I see a blue car next Tuesday. The odds were already pretty good. You were going to see a blue car next Tuesday. It's pretty easy to believe you're going to see a blue car next Tuesday. But your mind sees that as a success. And then you go from there, something a little less likely, and just work your way up. And then your mind gets used to the idea that when I do this, things happen. And once it accepts the idea, it's much easier for you to get to do it. Are demons interested in working with us because they want to see us? I need to make sure that. Okay. Are demons interested in working with us because they want to see us spiritually evolve? Um, that very much depends on how you define the word demon. To me, a demon is a being that came from a primal source, manifested on its own, and has a warrior like aspect. For the most part, I get along well with demons, but they do not necessarily care about us as a species. They can be reciprocal. They can have interest in you individually if you become something that they find interesting. But that would be on an individual level. To me, working with a demon is like working with a dog that's smarter than you. That's the best way I would put it. Look at working with a dog or a wolf that is smarter than you are. And you can get it to like you and be interested in your evolution, but it is not necessarily going to be. You need to develop rapport. You need to develop personal understanding and actual alliance with these beings. And you know, you can do this thing where you form pacts, but that a lot of the things that want those kind of packs are definitely not interested in positive spiritual evolution for you, right? You can make pacts with beings that aren't actually demons, like the beings in the Goetia. Very few of those beings are what I would actually term a demon. These are old school gods and goddesses that have been demonized. And a lot of them, yeah, they are interested in your evolution. They took on a role a long time ago that has been twisted and turned around at this point, but they're still interested in doing their jobs. And if you the more you work with them, it the more you're going to understand them, the more you're going to get to the core of them. And the core of most of those demons, like the ones in the Goetia, are very interested in watching you evolve because it is pleasing to them. It is something that they enjoy doing, right? We all have our things that entertain us. And especially like well, I don't think Abraxas is in the Goetia, but Abraxas is a great example of the being that some people consider a demon. Actually a god. I'm pretty sure I have trouble remembering where anything is as far as go with this guy, this demon's in the Goetia, this demon's over in this book. I just don't care, to be honest. Either way, Abraxas is one that has been demonized on many occasions and is often referred to as a demon, but very interested in watching people evolve in a magical sense because it entertains him. He likes seeing people experience these things. If I use pop culture magic, does a character have to be currently popular? No. Like like Unigriffin said, yeah, Abraxas is pretty awesome. He can be a bit jarring. He very much wants to experience you learning, and he can be a bit pushy about that. But pop culture magic icons. No, but the more that person has been useful, or excuse me, the more that person has been popular at any one point, the stronger their form is going to be, especially if everyone really agreed on who it was. Like Bob Hope, right? Bob Hope's gonna have a hell of a pop culture tulpa presence that you could summon rather than trying to summon his actual ghost, which would be a totally different experience. The Bob Hope Tulpa pop culture icon creation, get no respect, right? He would be exactly what you expect him to be for the most part, or at least what everyone expects him to be. And if you tailor it to to your image of him when you were summoning him, it's going to be exactly like Una Griffin just said. Um, how did she say it? It's whatever you decide it is. Yes, actually, that's a very much so repetition based. Keep making you do the same thing until you figure out what he's talking about. Yeah, yeah, that's Abraxas. I've had a very similar experience. Okay, so um, we're still on containment. There was some more I wanted to say about that. So containment is a great way to go for any, like I was talking about how is areas of effect. Um, the containment style is a great way to go for anything where you're wanting to charge a space for wards. Like anytime you have your magical space, like I'm building a temple out there, but this is as well an area that is containing magic at all time. You should. I like to think of my entire altar room as a form, or the anchor point for a form that is contained as a space to do my spell work. Like there's a spell of the room that the intent is this room will be conducive to the practice of spellcraft. And then, like I said, when you're creating a spell on someone else with a containment method, the area of effect is not at the anchor point with the jar, but on the person themselves. And that's whether you're casting positively or negatively at that person. And again, I'm going to repeat that little side tip there. If it's something positive, get their permission, not just for ethical reasons, but because that's how they let you in. That will bolster the power of the spell simply by being allowed in. The eye too seems familiar with Abraxas. I didn't think about it till you brought it up, but that seems familiar as well. I worked with Abraxas a bit some when I first started realizing that I was going to be writing the first book, that I was actually going to start trying to teach on a more serious level. So I worked with him some there. And there's some stuff in the original version of the Sorcerer's Shadow that I unfortunately cut out in the second one that he helped with that I may re-add in volume 3. Because there was some cool stuff there that I just kind of I took out to make the book more cohesive, but some of it was pretty cool. And we'll probably add it back into to book 3. Speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and do a plug again here. This episode of the live is called Manifest the Mechanics of Manifesting, How to Cast a Successful Spell. I also have an essay on this idea in particular on the Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1, which is in the pinned post here. It's $9.99 for a hard copy, $2.99 for a Kindle book, and it comes with an entire playlist with each essay has a video explaining it here on YouTube. Okay, there you go. There's my plug. Done with that. Oh, except for subscribe to my channel. 99 cents a month. You get membership. You get early access to stuff. Okay. And blooper reels. Why is it that it is recommended to go into the woods to make an offering to a demon or whatever summoning you're doing? The woods is an alternative to a dedicated altar in your house, for example. It's not recommended by everybody. For sure, if you're doing like a summoning, no, I do that. I would absolutely do that in my altar room, unless I was summoning specifically something that was foresty in nature. With demons, I tend to want to be, well, ideally, I want to be subterranean. I want to be in a basement. This area isn't in a basement, but I tend to want to be in a basement period anyways. But that's not possible at the moment. But yeah, the woods, it's a good isolated space. A lot of people will recommend woods for certain types of workings, but you can make a dedicated space out there, cast a circle, that sort of thing. But to me, I'm better off working in a warren, in a temple, in a space that you have had that repetition over time of this is my magical space. This is where my will is worked, especially with summoning, especially if you're going to be summoning a demon. Because again, we are talking about warrior like spirits. Another thing that I will advise when working with demons, and this isn't because you should be expecting to get into a fight, but bring astral weaponry. Have a way to defend yourself. To not have a way to defend yourself is to insult them, right? So like I said, with actual demons, we're talking about warrior spirits. They don't want you showing up and acting treating them like they're harmless. But they're also not going to respect you if you show up with fear in your heart. So come armed in a way that you know you can protect yourself. And I have a couple of videos on astral combat, and we did a live not that long ago about that sort of thing, I believe. But yeah, dream staff, you know, a brass bell, something. But if you're trying to summon a forest nymph, go to the forest because you're not going to get a forest nymph to appear in your bedroom. Not that you're necessarily going to be able to get like easily physically manifest a forest nymph. Don't want to get your hopes up too much. Okay, where did that go? There we are. Wow, time has just been flying by tonight. Which is funny because I felt a little bit um sleepy before the live. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna struggle on the live." And the second I hit that button, happens a lot though. I should have known. I should have known the second I hit that go live button, my energy level pops up. You guys kind of energize me, you know? Does my astral weapon need a physical counterpart? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Um, oh, it's upstairs. No, it isn't. It's right there. Just a moment. I'm gonna grab something real quick. It can be. Like, this is my dream staff, and this has an astral form that is connected directly to its shape that I connected it to on my dream platform. Like, I reshaped this stick on the astral plane and connected its exact likeness astrally to its physical shape. And this is a very effective weapon that we can use for such things. But I mean, I like to have a physical manifestation, like the brass bell, for example, is something that, if they're starting to physically manifest and you don't like what's going on, you can grab that bell and just start ringing it and be like, out, 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 out. Whatever you need to scream, that vibration, that shaking will literally break up the form. A piece of selenite as well is a good way to have this sort of weapon. But if you can contain that power of the belly fire in yourself or some other type of astral means of breaking apart their astral form, if you have that and it is apparent that you can do such a thing, then they won't feel slighted. They won't feel insulted and you shouldn't have to use it. Astral armor. Yes, you can that type of thing can totally be effective and be a thing. You can literally visualize the armor on yourself, but with armor, I feel that you got to have more cohesion than simply visualizing it on. Right? I've done that before in the past, and it's held on by your will, and it is a thing. But um, I like to have such a thing anchored into a sigil that you are then charging on a repetitive basis. I said that funny. Charging on a repetitive basis. There we go. Um, and that Because like I said before about the law of repetition, every time a cycle is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases. And that's also going to increase the cohesion and strength of armor. And that's the whole thing with armor is you're trying to make it dense. You're trying to condense as much energy and intent into that blocking as possible. So the more it's repeated, the more cohesion it gets, and the stronger it becomes, especially if it has an anchor point. I really like things like weapons and armor to have physical manifestations of them as well to really anchor them into place and something that you can charge at times when it's not being used. Because if it's just a visualization, yeah, you might remember to do it in other projections and stuff and visualize the armor on, but it's not going to be repeated as much than if you've got like even a little figurine of a knight in shining armor on your desk that it's anchored to and you see all the time. Oh, absolutely. A ring can be used as a weapon. This is the manifestation of the weapon. That with a ring, often you are holding some form of astral energy in it. Like just like it's a D&D game, just like in Dungeons and Dragons, right? You put the fire spell in the ring and then hold it there. Kind of the same deal with an astral ring. You're putting it on and you're whatever that power is that you've connected to it, you want to charge to it regularly, use that as the anchor point. But the cool thing about the ring is there's a good sense memory there of when I put on this ring, I have this power. Really not very limited at all. Um, Shooting beams out of your palms astrally, there are lots of people that do that sort of thing. I've seen it be effective, even with ghosts that are more etheric and actually essentially on the material plane. I've seen people actually at the ghost. Um, One of the most impressive was a non-verbal autistic that I used to take care of in a group setting. Like I was the night watchman type guy, whatever you want to call it, for a group of developmentally disabled adults. And one of them was one of the most impressive autistic person I've one of the most impressive people I've ever met. I don't know why I needed to preface that with autism. One of the most impressive people I've ever met as far as it comes to directing energy. There's one time where he sprained his ankle and I'd been gone for a few days and they were telling me about what happened. And he reached over and grabbed my wrist and made me feel the sprain of his ankle in my wrist, made me jerk out of his hand. But, anyways, that's not the point. There's another time where he caught a ghost that had been in the house. And people, like the whole house, have been talking about it, not just the developmentally disabled ones, but the rest of the staff have been talking about this ghost. And Ted, I'd seen him on many occasions directing energy with his hands and moving it around, but he had actually trapped the ghost to the wall by shooting the energy out of his hands and pinning it there. And then he came and got me and actually pointed the ghost out to me. That's how I know about this. 'Cause I was hanging out in the main room. He's supposed to be asleep. All of a sudden, here he comes, like making his noises and gesturing to me to obviously to follow him. I go in there and he's got a ghost pinned against the goddamn wall that he had clearly shot energy on to do it there. So, anyways, back to the shooting beams out of your hands. If I was to do that, I've got a few videos on belly fire. If I do something like that, it's almost always where I'm reaching from is the belly because there's the pure physical process of destruction taking place inside of your belly when your stomach acid breaks apart the food in there, right? That chemical reaction of the actual destruction of the food and the energy released. That is the belly fire. And then you draw that up through the self and out the hands. And you can do this on the physical plane or the astral plane. It gives us quite a significant power on the astral plane because it's ethereal energy and it's condensed. Now, you can use this as well. You mentioned the astral sword just now. You can use that to form the sword and then imagine the edge having that cutting power of destruction that comes with the consumption of food within the belly. Because it's really a useful tool to have that connected to any form of astral weaponry. Because, as I said, it is energy that is on the edge. It is right there on the edge of the material plane. So it has this particular oomph. And it is a type of energy that most purely astral beings cannot produce. So it gives us an extra edge, if you will. Okay. We are coming up on the 3-hour mark here pretty quick. Trying to think if there's anything important that I've missed. I already plugged my book. Yeah, if you haven't bought my book, buy a copy. It's I put a lot of work into that first one. And then we got 2, and then 3 will be along here fairly soon. Almost 3 a.m., eh? Yeah, it's almost midnight here. I've got dinner to eat. We've got a guest. I can't stay up too much. I can't keep doing this much later than my normal 12 a.m. What's after containment? Well, that's the whole. That's the 4 steps. After containment is repetition. However many times you want to repeat the spell to create the field, and then it will fade over time if you don't continue repeating it. So after containment is repetition and or placement. If it's something, because there are some other examples, like that spell I was talking about earlier, where I had where I used the string to constrict around the pouch. Part of the reason I put the resulting object on the person's doorstep was because I had no way to link to them. So sometimes with containment, where it creates a field, your final step will be placement. Like I said, you can have a ward in your room that is to keep people out or create whatever vibe you want, and you keep the anchor point there, which is where the morphic energy field is emanating from. So with anything that's contained directly on the object, your final work is placement. Let's see. I feel like there's something more I want to say about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's why I put it on their doorstep so that they would see it. And I suppose with that one, probably release was the next thing because they probably destroyed it. But there was that moment when they see it, and that's when the spell is actually triggered in a case like that. Right? They see it, and you want them to act with fear or disgust. What are my actual end goals? My actual end goals for the remainder of this life, like well, for a while there, honestly, I felt like Inigo Montoya after he killed the Six-Fingered Man after May 5th, 2012, because if my memories serve, that took me lifetimes of work to reach that point where we finally got rid of Yehad. So my end goals from this point on is Dragon of the West actually hits it right there, is to change how much magic can affect the physical reality. It can affect it to a much larger degree than we realize. But my goal at this point is to increase the way that magic is able to manifest on the physical plane. That is my end goal. That is my purpose at this point. And part of that is to convince everyone of their sovereignty, to make people understand and believe that magic is real and that they have their place within the context of reality, but also to encourage people to enjoy life and be entertained by it. These are the things that spread magic. So my purpose at this point is to get people to feel free and happy and understand the purpose and power of magic, which is why I started teaching. Because I didn't take up any of this stuff till after May 5th, 2012. Yes, that is my whole purpose at this point, is to convince people magic is real. Because the more people we convince magic is real, the more powerful it becomes. And the more we can get back to a sane reality, proper balance. Because our reality is completely off kilter. Everyone is obsessed with this idea of common sense and this materialistic view that isn't reality and isn't sensible. And tons of people are unhappy because of that wrong focus. And that unhappiness throws off the kilter of it all and saps away at the balance that keeps magic from working properly as well. So we need belief in magic and belief in joy. We spread the power of joy and happiness and connectedness and love. Oh my gosh, I sound like a goddamn hippie. Reminds you of Penguin. Um, um, you mean like the episode where he made fun of me, or? Probably the one thing I have that's different between me and your standard stereotype of a hippie is I'm definitely not a pacifist. Internal alchemy, the transformation of the self. If that's what you mean by internal alchemy, it's been an ongoing process my entire life. It is part of the way that we become, because we're all constantly changing inside. This transformation of the self is something that is taking place all the time. When we do the internal alchemy, all we're really doing is taking conscious control of that transformation that is already taking place. Okay, you mean like purification meditations? Because if that's what you mean, um I focus on my sigil at least once a day. I try to at least once a day hold myself to my sigil and draw my cohesion into that form. Will you be able to convince Penguin that magic is real? I did do a video to help him with his court case not long ago. He I'd have to get his attention. It is as is if he has made some kind of a challenge that way. I'm unaware of it, but I would love to be aware of it. I know he was on a kick for a while there where he was talking about a bunch of us. Like I said, he did an episode talking about me. That's the whole reason I'm monetized, honestly. And so I really appreciate him for that. That's why I tried to do a spell to help him with his court case with United States immigration. Like, I think he was trying to make fun of me, honestly. A lot of my friends were real upset when they saw that Penguin was talking about me and making fun of me, but I was like, "No, this is awesome. This is great." I mean, I laughed. I thought he was funny. I think it's funny the stuff he said about me. Seems like a good guy too, honestly, Penguin. But either way, um, I would have to know what his criteria are before I could say whether I could convince him or not. I mean, most things, as far as what I consider magic, the placebo effect alone, it's already been proven. There's no question. There is no question the placebo effect is real. And that's the people that can get better simply because they believe they are going to get better. And the nocebo effect as well. The opposite of that has been completely proven to be real. That alone proves that at least the psychological aspect of magic is real. It's true. It works, you know? And there are other things that can be proven to work. But a lot of the things that can be proven in a lab setting are on the verge of being science, you know? Like once anything works out to be real, now it's no longer magic, it's science. Like their medicines even, those came from herbs, even though they talk about, how oh, herbal remedies don't cure anything. Well, the chemical compound that you synthesize, you learned that formula from inside of a plant or inside of a bug or whatever it is, and half the time from something that some herbalist had said was good. And you finally found out that there's okay, this chemical in it is what makes it good. So we'll synthesize just that chemical. So now it's science. And the herbalism doesn't work. Well, you got where you were from it. Just because it started, just because we could prove it works, now it's science and not magic. It's absurd. The creation of mercury was from alchemy and magical processes. That when then you figured out you could repeat it, now it's not magic anymore. So, like I said, I'd have to know what his criteria were before I could convince him. But if he's got some kind of direct challenge as to what he wants there that I'm unaware of, I'd love to be made aware of it. Anyways, we have hit that 3-hour mark. I feel like I've said what I wanted to say about containment and placement. I'm really enjoying you being on these lives, Johnston. You asked some great questions. Yeah, I feel like I've kind of answered you about the alchemy the best that I can. Um, like I've definitely the whole inner alchemy thing has never interested me as much as old school alchemy. Like I've done a lot of old school out like material plane alchemy, but as far as the internal stuff, I do go through transformation. I do inner transformation. I do the meditations where I create cohesiveness of my form by focusing on my sigil and refining myself into a cohesive concept. But the phrase internal alchemy, if that means something more than that, then I guess no, I don't. Okay, like your chakras. Yeah, I mean, like I have my own chakras. I don't focus on the main ones very often. I have my belly fire that I work with. I work with the heart chakra a lot, which is it's the same as any other heart chakra. but I've got like my poison elbow that I've talked about before, which is a chakra that I created in my elbow to draw any negative intent that is aimed at my form into my. Oh, that was the other one. There was one more. There was one more thing I wanted to say about the containment spells. We have also the witch's bottles, which the form is in the jar itself. Now, what do I mean by a witch's bottle? I didn't mean a whole lot. A witch's bottle looks almost like you're cursing your damn self. You take some of your hair, some of your fingernail clippings, etc., any other links that people might attack you with, and you put them in a jar with the intent that any attacks on you will go rather than to you, they will go into the jar. And this is a morphic field that you keep away from yourself that is intended to draw those intents, kind of like my elbow draws them out to filter them out, right? You have one of these jars, and then you put your hair, fingernail clippings in it with the intent of drawing negative spells to be drawn into it, almost like a decoy. And in there, you can put broken glass. A lot of people like to put bits of broken mirror in there, so it's reflected back to sender, like a return to send, inherent return to sender spell inside the jar. You can add other things to it. Typically, you will once you put all the other things in it, whatever you want to add, you then urinate in the jar, close it, and bury it in the ground. And with that one, the morphing field is once again anchored at the point, is connected to the anchor point and manifests where the anchor point is, but it's also slightly connected to you, as in it creates a side channel, a way to draw ill intent off of you and into the jar itself. And a lot of people that I've known will just create one of these about once a year. But you run out of places to bury such things. So, I don't know if I really recommend that. Anyways, um, yeah, I mentioned the book one more time. It's in the pinned post there. At some point, the book club is actually going to get to those ones. And I plan to write episode 3 at some point within the next year. We have any more questions about the topic? Comments, questions, concerns? I think I've answered as much as I can about the internal alchemy for now. But thank you all for sticking with me. We really hit high numbers tonight for this channel on the amount of people that have come and stuck around. It really makes me happy. I'm glad that I'm really starting to resonate with people. This is exactly it. Getting people to understand their context within reality. That's my whole groove now. This is so. The more we get this out, the more we can talk about magic, and the more people that wind up hearing my words, the better. So I appreciate y'all being here. And any of you that want to like, oh yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Right? If you haven't liked the video, this is a good opportunity to do so. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, now is the opportunity. Okay, so that's enough of me plugging stuff. I think that concludes it for tonight. I've had a great time. I'm really awesome. I learned some tonight as well, or at least was able to articulate some things in a better way to assist with my own understanding. of what it is that I was trying to say. So this has been a very productive night for me as well. That being said, I do think it's time for me to go. So, concept of karma. I'll answer that real quick. Um, Karma, I do believe in its original sense, in that karma, good karma, is behaving within your own nature. Because if you behave within your own nature, then you get the flow of fate that your pattern and will intends, right? So that's what I think about the concept of karma. Um, if you want a fuller explanation after the live, you can go to my channel and look that up. I actually have a full live on that. Awesome, Kenneth. You have a good night, and I'm glad to that helps for my stats when people rewatch when people watch it immediately afterwards. But at this point, I am going to call it for the night. So, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.